Hello, I'm Rick Hertless, founder of His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program as we look into the book of Daniel. We are starting chapter 5 today, and chapter 5, verse 1. Before we get into that, please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. And thank you so much to those who do support our ministry through your financial gifts and through your prayer support. We are in Daniel 5, and it starts off. Now this, we already talked about earlier this week that Nebuchadnezzar's life obviously was coming to the end, because now Belshazzar is Nebuchadnezzar's son. So he is the new king. And he's about to make some huge mistakes right here in the beginning. And so he's not going to last a real long time. So here we go. Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Now, let's stop there for a second. We already talked a little bit about Nebuchadnezzar. We don't know for a fact. Ron was using the term saved, and that's a valid term even for the Old Testament, because Jesus' sacrifice was once for all. And so, since we know circumcision is that of the heart, since we know that many Jews were killed, well, think about the ones at the bottom that were worshiping idols when Moses came down from the mount. And they were all killed because they were unbelievers. Okay? So being a Jew has always been of the heart. It has never been because you're born in Israel. That is so important. So it has always been of the heart. And in fact, the law that God gave was always intended that it was in the heart that you were going to follow the law. You were following that law because you didn't want to hurt God, not because, you didn't want him to cut off your hands or head or whatever it was that they did. So that was extremely important. Well, Nebuchadnezzar, he had some respect for God, at least. Whether or not he was a believer or not, he still had respect for God, because he took all the silver and the gold and everything from the temple, but he did not use any of it. He put it in a special place. And he was afraid he was going to desecrate it. So he didn't mess with that. Well, Belshazzar didn't care. He had contempt for God. And so he is now going to take all of all of the gold and the silver that his father had set aside, and he has contempt for God. In today's society, we can go down the list. When Sam Walton was alive, Walmart was a Christian store, a Christian organization. Very much so. You could easily see that he very much was a Christian. When he died and his family took over, it began to degrade, and now the degradation has just gotten out of control. The same you might say with Chick-fil-A. When the old man was alive, he was concerned with Christian values. Now that he is no longer alive and his sons or his family has taken over, now all of a sudden you're seeing the homosexual agenda infiltrate Chick-fil-A, and they're embracing that agenda. It is now going away from God. To me, it shows they have contempt for God. They're now worshiping their idol, which is money. The same with Walmart. The family of Walmart is now worshiping their idol, which is money. The same exact thing is happening here with Belshazzar. He is following his own power and money, and he has contempt for God. He's not even caring what he does for those things. And so, verse 3, then they brought the gold vessels they had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods. You see, little g, praise the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. In other words, they praise their money. Exactly what I'm saying Walmart has done, Chick-fil-A is doing, many that we've seen now, the younger generation that is really worshiping the idol of money. And so we're seeing that taking over America. That is what it's doing. There's contempt for God in every single thing there is. It's all about their new idol, money. Ron Stoddle.
And we can relate that to our own lives. I'm not saying everybody does it, but we can. I think everybody can relate to it, whether they've done it or just seen it. The concern for having a job, getting promoted in that job, providing for our family of our own accord, and whether we willingly are pursuing that advancement for self-righteous reasons or just pursuing it to provide for our family, I think at some point we have all fallen victim to that, thinking that we have to progress to provide. And it's not relying on God at every step of He's going to provide by either our next promotion or even our next paycheck. So we have to really be careful on. I was doing a study last night on the Old Testament tithing and the different tithes that they gave based off how God blessed them through their crops, their livestock, and all those. And it really, their tithing in the Old Testament was solely based on how God blessed them. Well, if they weren't grateful for what they had, God wasn't going to bless them, and they wouldn't have the tithe to give off that crop. And I think they in the Old Testament were more cognizant of their harvest each time, realizing of my harvest was plentiful this time, therefore I get to give God a blessing. Or if their harvest wasn't as plentiful, was it, God behind it, or was it something that I did? I don't think we really acknowledge that as much today. I mean, someone like me, I have a salaried job. Short of committing, a crime, getting fired, doing something blatantly wrong, I'm going to get that paycheck every week. So, I think we kind of, and someone that's hourly, if they're full-time or part-time hourly, as long as they meet those hours, they're going to get that paycheck every week. As long as they don't do something wrong where they have to suffer on that paycheck, we just expect it. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament also, their benefits or their blessings were based off how hard they worked, and as a result, how much they got to bless God based on how much they were blessed as a result of their hard work. We don't really get to experience that today. So it's hard for people to really understand this concept of blessing us, that God blesses us, and how much we get to bless, because we're basically on a fixed set amount that we see on a regular basis.
And I think it even goes deeper than that to me, because of the lack of commitment to God. People used to do their job for integrity's sake, and the money would just follow.
Yeah,
the money would grow and just follow. You weren't really doing it only for getting the raise. You were doing the job because you had integrity. You wanted to do a good job at whatever you did. We've lost that. There is no integrity in the workforce anymore, because there's no integrity in our society. If you think about a good example of this contempt for God is the lack of marriage in our country. It's all right with kids now who just want to live together, and they see nothing wrong with that. In fact, me believing in marriage is old-fashioned. It's something that's outdated, and it's just an old tradition you don't need to worry about. It's not a tradition. It is something that God has told us that we must do, that a man and woman will cleave together. In other words, that means they will make a commitment together. And in fact, more than that, it says the two will become one. And so at that point, spiritually, whether you like it or not, you're going to become one when you unite in that union. But the contempt that society has for God says, well, we don't have to worry about marriage any longer.
Well, and they have basically brainwashed society into thinking marriage is just a piece of paper. You get one when you get married, you get one when you get divorced. And they use the Old Testament concept when they were told, if you're going to divorce, give a letter of divorce. It wasn't the same concept that it is today. That is, in the Old Testament, that was just proof that it had happened, that you basically weren't cheating on your husband at that time. But it was also a symbol of saying they actually had to, it wasn't just, get out of my life and go away. I have to go through a process. These days, it's so simple to get a marriage and a divorce. You go to Las Vegas and it takes 5 minutes to get married. And a divorce, if you have no kids, no assets or nothing, it's about as long to get a divorce.
You can do it online.
Yeah, right. So these days, marriage and divorce, people have been brainwashed into thinking it's just a piece of paper.
See, that's my point. It's just contempt for God. It's lack of integrity. It's not understanding that this is God's will, that we show the commitment by getting married under Him for life.
Right.
Not for convenience, not for financial, and not for just a period of time, a short period of time. Well, if this doesn't work out, we'll just get a divorce and I'll go get another one.
If we actually instilled in our children these days that piece of paper to God means nothing, that you could be married in God's eyes without any paperwork.
That's right, because, and that's exactly right. It's not the license that we're talking about here. It's not going to the courthouse and paying your marriage fee. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about exactly what you're talking about. Going before God and getting married under God. It doesn't matter. That piece of paper really does not matter.
Could you imagine if, and I know you can agree with me on this, if it was taught in churches today that teenagers just having random sex was adultery in God's eyes?
Well, it's fornication for certain.
Well, it is, but
it's fornication because that is extramarital. I mean, that's sex out of wedlock.
Right.
And so adultery would be, of course, they're already married and they're having an extramarital affair with someone else. Still, either way, though, God talks about fornication and adultery on the same level.
But, and you agree, I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, they won't even touch that concept in churches because it would offend too many people. We'll talk about, marriage and the sanctity of marriage, but we won't touch what the teenagers are doing because we don't want to turn them off to leaving before.
We don't want to talk about fornication.
Right.
I mean, that's...
Let alone talking to the adults about the biblical concepts of if you get divorced outside of the biblical principles of divorce and you get involved with someone else, you have forced that person to commit adultery, whether they know it or not, and you're committing adultery. They won't even touch that concept.
Well, there was a show not too long ago on Netflix. I never watched it because I saw the title and I knew what it was going to be about. It was called Californication. Well, the title tells you what it's about. You don't have to, it's going to be a bunch of people running around with a whole bunch of other people having sex. That's what it's about. But the point is that we have so adopted it into our culture that we're making shows about it. I mean, there are other shows that we're making. We're actually have so much contempt for God that on the same network we have a program called Lucifer, and it's where Lucifer's a good guy. I haven't watched it either, but I've been told Lucifer's a good guy.
Well, that's on Fox.
He goes around and helps people. Oh, okay,
yeah,
whatever. He goes around
Fox,
helping
the channel that gives us the fair and balanced Fox News.
Yeah, but you know what? Fox has always been perverse.
Well,
Think about There was that one, the Family Guy. Is that what it was?
That is a show.
I mean, it was a cartoon, right? I watched like half of that one time, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Well,
this is a very perverted show, and it's done in the form of a cartoon, and so it sucks in our kids.
Well, there's another show out now, Good Omens, where a demon and an angel team up to help save the world.
Yeah, that's what that was another one I
That was
heard
another
about.
one, yeah.
It's like, so all of that is contempt for God. As we go further and further and further, the Bible talks about the great falling away. And I've said, I believe we are in that period of time, the great falling away. I mean, you've got so many churches now that basically are worshiping Satan. They don't, because of the subtleness, they don't even realize it, but just like the subtleness of the show Lucifer. Wasn't that a show supposedly about he was a good guy?
I'm with you. I haven't watched it.
The one you were talking about,
Good Omens.
Good Omens, where the demons and the angels are supposed to be where they're helping people or whatever. See, it's subtle. It's subtly brought in. Well, that's the same thing that's really going on here with Belshazzar, because he says, "Hey, you know, all that silver and gold stuff that's over there in that warehouse, it doesn't mean anything. Bring it on over here.
We'll put it to good use.
And we're going to put it to good use." And the rest of the people are like, "Well, yeah, it's just things, objects. You know, so yeah, let's go ahead and use." So it's not even anything that dawned on them that put up any red flags. Now, on the ones that did put up red flags, they probably didn't care anyway because they had as much contempt for God as Belshazzar did. But so he's not believing what his fathers did. Well, that's exactly what's going on right here. I think that's the great falling away, is really, if you think about where we've come spiritually in this country and around the world. It's not only this country, it's around the world. If you think about spiritually where we've come, the contempt for God in our youth culture is astounding. Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining with us at His Gospel Power. Please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. Thank you so much to all of those who do support our ministry as we bring this study of the Word of God around the world, as we look into the last days and discover how God wants us to live for Him in these last days. It is time, Christians, for you to come out from among them. Now, that does not mean you should shun them and not have anything to do with them, because then you can no longer be the salt, you can't give the gospel. But it is spiritually, you are to come out from among them culturally and not embrace the culture of the world. You should never have been doing it anyway, but now even more so in these last days. Until next time, I pray you receive His gospel power today.
He died for you, He died for me. From our sin, He set us free. He loved us so, His life He gave. So if we ask, we can be saved. He's calling you, He's calling you. Jesus Christ is calling you. If He's touched your heart and soul, then come let Jesus make you whole. Come kneel with me and we will pray that all your sin be washed away. Don't be afraid, don't be ashamed. Just come Hallelujah.